Hi everyone! Today I will demonstrate some of the most popular techniques in watercolor painting. These are some materials that you will need. A cup of water, 2 watercolor paints, 2 colors. I'm using magenta and lunar blue. You can choose whatever you prefer. We are also going to need a piece of paper to try some shades and the colors, washi tape, a brush, and number 8 is the one I'm using, a round one, a pencil. I chose a magenta one. Don't forget to sharpen your pencil. Some paper towels or a rag. We'll also need some watercolor paper. I'm using one that is 300 GSM, 100% cotton and cold press. Some tree leaves for inspiration and also as model. This is an example of what we are going to do today. Now, as I always say, we should focus in one problem at a time. So today the problem is not how to learn how to draw a leaf. So we are just copying some leaves by their contour, trying to respect their shape. Also, find a balance display, a composition that you may like, with a variety of shapes and sizes. Sometimes we have to improve or we have to change a bit our model if we want to obtain a specific effect. So feel welcome to draw them by hand if you feel comfortable. I always try the colors and shades first in the old sketchbook paper. And the first technique is the wet on dry. It's called like that because you use wet paint on dry paper. As you can observe, you follow the water or gently drag the drop on the paper. Now we are going to use the technique wet on wet. Using a clean brush, wet your paper evenly with water. Make sure to cover the entire surface of the paper with water, but don't overdo it. You want the paper to be wet, but not soaking wet or dripping. Then you add color. Dip your brush into the paint and apply it into the wet paper. The paint should spread out and blend with the water, creating beautiful color wash. In my third leaf, I will use the wet on wet technique again. So I will add water to the paper and then I will start painting. When I finish, but before I let the watercolor dry, I will add coarse salt. The salt gives a very interesting texture to your final work. In the next one, I also will use wet on wet, and also before it gets dry, I will add fine salt. The texture that we obtain from one and another are different, but both very interesting to work with. Please do not touch it until it has completely dried, however tempting it may be. In this one, I will go back to the wet on dry, but to be sincere, it doesn't matter at this point. I just want you to practice one or another so you can feel the differences between these two main techniques. In this example, I'm adding hydrogen peroxide. As you can see, the pigment reacts with the hydrogen and it starts fading. On this one, I start with wet on dry. Again, I'm practicing on getting a wash, a surface of color without shades. And before it dries out, I will choose a second color that makes a kind of contrast. And I will try to make some dots on the top of it and see how the watercolor reacts, how it blends with the wet surface, and kind of playing around with the stains. One more I will play around. I will put some water only in the middle of the leaf and not in the borders. So as you can see, I have a clear control of the ink in the borders. And then I will just touch the area with water without covering it up. So it's kind of, I want the reaction of the watercolor ink with the water, but not completely blending both of them. And I cover just the center of the leaf with water. In my last one, the main technique will be wet on dry. So again, the first part is just to cover the shape of a leaf with a color. I always try to keep the same shade for now in this exercise. After it's completely dried, I will use a bamboo straw to stamp and make some marks on the top of the leaf. Feel welcome to find any other tool to make some marks and just have fun, play around, try to find some balance. Combine stamping with painting as long as it makes sense to you. Will always be fine. Watercolor painting is a beautiful and relaxing art form that lets you create beautiful work using just water, ink, and paper. It's easy to set up your workspace with all the materials you need to get started, but it's also easy to clean and put it away in the end. In my opinion, ends up being the perfect technique to paint at the end of the day if you only have a very short period of time. So let's see how the watercolor effects turn it out. Before we go, don't forget to write the techniques we have used so you can remember them later. Please feel welcome to share with me your doubts and results.